All right, hi everybody. I'm Warlord Magni, and thanks for coming to the next installment in my Newb to Warlord series. Today we're going to talk about fakes, feints, and baits. Right. So the entire point of this class is to throw smoke at your opponent, or in other words, trying to confuse them and give them bad information so you can capitalize on that. Right. So you're trying to like jam up their combat computer. Um, as I've talked about in previous classes, uh, or you're trying to intentionally instigate them to move or react in a way that you are accounting for, and then you capitalize on that movement. Um, yeah, okay. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the differentiation between a fake, a feint, and a bait. All right. So a fake is where you're primarily using your sword for the movement, right? So I can throw a series of different things. I can throw a pump, right? I'm not actually throwing a shot. I'm faking a shot. So a pump, you can twitch, uh, or you can do like a redirection where you throw, right? So these are pretty much the full scale of different types of fakes you can do. Um, it all depends on how much you throw into the fake. Okay. Um, I'll go through later in the class different fakes for different categories, so on and so forth. But right now we're just going to talk about like definitions. So a fake is using the equipment, right? A feint, F-E-I-N-T or F-A-I-N-T, whatever version you want to spell it, is where you're using your body to display movement. So that can be your upper body, it can be your footwork as well. So you can juke, right? Whether it be like that, you can do like stutter steps, something like that. Uh, Also, using like fading shots, where that you're you're making your opponent think that you're gonna back out, so they would like close, and then you step in, right? Something like that. Uh, you can also do sort of like level changes where throw high, but your body's moving low, right? And so the point of the feint is typically your opponent is going to move their guard in the direction that your body is moving, right? So I throw here, Sean moves his guard, and I would throw high, right? And then a bait, right, is very different than fakes and feints. Fakes and feints are active movements, where a bait is very passive. You're adjusting your stance to get your opponent to think, hey, I can hit that, right? So something that I would do is I would like lean this shoulder forward, so it's really easy for Sean to try to get that, you know, and I would purposely think, all right, my shoulder's forward, Sean realizes it, 80% chance, or whatever chance, high likelihood that Sean's going to try to go for the shoulder. That's where I know I need to block. Boom. And then, you know, whatever opening I try to capitalize on. Um, so you can do this forward shoulder. If you have a board, you don't need to grab it. If you have like a sorting board set up, just dropping the board just underneath your shoulder, right? A lot of people are going to think, oh, I can get it, throw. Um, you can do, like I said, a stance switch, or even with like this normal switch, the way that I'm leaning, I'm pushing this shoulder forward. Most people would have, if you are going to lean this forward, there's reasons to and not to do this and not to do this. But in the case that I'm trying to bait Sean, I'm going to lean forward so Sean thinks that he can get this more readily. What else? yeah, you can change your guard placement. So most people have like these mid guards. If you have like a high guard, this underarm looks real tasty, right? So Sean is gonna try to go for that, boom, right? But instead, boop, and get him into a block strike. Also, instead of high, you can do the same thing, but now reversed as a low guard. My forearm looks real tasty. So, boom, throw. You're supposed to throw. Something like that, or do it again. Right. The point of the bait is you can guess pretty heavily where your opponent's going to throw, right? So you know where you need to block. I'll talk really quickly about the success rate. So baits has this weird success rate depending on who you're fighting. So when you fight new players, baits typically work really, really well, because the newer players like, oh, this is something that I could hit, but they don't realize it's a bait. And then the longer, like, mid-experienced fighters begin to stop taking baits because they're like, oh, this is a bait, I'm not going to be able to get it. And then going up into like really experienced fighters, baits begin to work more because a lot of really experienced fighters are like cocky and are like, I know it's a bait, I see it's a bait, but I bet I can get it. And then, they die or they don't. So just realize that when you start using baits, it's going to work differently on different people, as pretty much all of your fakes and your feints. A lot of these things require decent amounts of speed, at least for the fakes and feints, right? Sometimes a fake will work really well if you do a slow timing, because most people in the fighting is like super fast. But if you do something like throw, it jams their computer of like, why are you moving so slow? Or they'll go to like block something and then they'll move their guard even though nothing has happened, right? It was like, huh, throw. Something like that. So those are the primary differences between the fakes, feints, and baits. Really quickly with baits, realize that you're probably going to die a lot as you learn how to use them. Just accept that until you get good at it. I personally don't use a lot of baits. It doesn't really fit my fighting style, but I'll use them unintentionally sometimes, and it works out, I guess. I don't die that much, so pros and cons. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some general tips of implementation, and then like do's and don'ts, and then we'll move into different examples. So all of these things depend on how much you sell it, right? So like the way I like to think about this is how much do you have to put in for you to cash a response that you want. And this is also going to depend on how long you've been fighting that person, right? If I want Sean to get his guard, if I want to move Sean's guard over here so I can hit his sword arm, here, like move a little bit. If I want, to pump over here to get Sean to move his guard so I can like, get that sword arm, sometimes it just takes a twitch, right? If I do like this, maybe Sean will move and then I can throw. Sometimes I have to throw a pump, and a pump can be anything from this to almost a full shot and you pull back, right? So it depends on how much you need to sell it. And if you've been doing it a lot, the more you try to sell and they realize it's a fake, the less it's going to work, right? Like, you're selling, like, people realize you're selling garbage at them. So they're not going to respond, right? So then you have to begin to mix things up, using different combinations, integrate it with different footwork. Sometimes instead of like, if I throw this pump, okay, first time it works. All right, I do it again. It works. Sean's eventually going to realize, like, what am I doing? I'm going to stop doing this. So then I respond, and Sean doesn't do anything. Okay, now I need Sean to actually think that's a threat, so sometimes I need to throw that actual shot. Does that make sense? Right? So then, okay, now Sean didn't respond, or you're not fully supposed to respond. Boom. Okay, now I get it. Now Sean has to see, okay, that's real, or begin to question what shots are real and what shots are fake. An important thing I like to do, or something I like to do within my fighting style, is I blend these two things, fakes and feints, together, right? So I'll like throw this high, and then try to go for a hip, because then I'm throwing two very confusing pieces of information. If I'm moving down here, I'm faking high, so Sean has to commit to one of those pieces of very large information, and most likely he's going to open himself up there, right? Um, so you could do that with like faking your body. I also like to do, so step out a little bit. I like to do this with a stab. So I'll take a big shift and stab out, right? So this big shift, it's somewhat a feint, but I'm throwing smoke. I'm trying to confuse my opponent. Move here, big shift, guard moves, stab. To throw the fake with it is throw. Oh, sorry. My bad. That was a little bit harder than I intended. Comedy. All right. So, mixing them together. Additionally, you need to be able to use the appropriate ranges with these fakes and feints, right? If I'm out here and I feint, why would Sean respond to that? Or if I like do some fakes, there's no way I'm going to hit Sean, right? But now if I'm in this like C range, B range, okay, now the things that I'm throwing, I'm faking, are actually threatening, so it makes Sean have to respond. Additionally, depending on your range, you want to throw different fakes and feints. For example, if pick up your board, so come a little bit closer into the middle. If I want to throw like this shot to get Sean to like drop his guard down, something like that, there's no point in me throwing this shot here, because there's not a lot of room for me to work this. It becomes really awkward. The spacing is off, the geometry's off, right? So you gotta like, if I'm in this A range, I'm gonna, do something like this, or drop and throw down, or do like back steps and throwing out, throwing over. A lot of the feints or fakes and movement that I would do in the A range is like backing out, or like twitching my whole body. Additionally, if they don't take it, you can throw and potentially hit. Let's see. Yeah, be careful with body placement. Vary your range. Another way is like to get across with range is like if you're using single sword. I'm gonna switch up swords really fast. So if I'm gonna like fake that, this works at different ranges, right? But sometimes if you fight somebody that's like an arm sniper, where your guard's supposed to be further out, not that way, right? Where somebody's like trying to get on the inside, throw over, right? I'm using my distance to fake over the shot, which is almost going to threaten, but then I redirect and then I follow up. Again, doing the level changes, right? Like level changes this close in don't sell as well as a level change in like mid B, because it gives you like the optimal spacing. Kind of think about like cone theory. Check that out in my combat theory class. It all depends on like where I'm maximally able to hit like surface area at my shoulder level, right? If I'm down here, I can't hit near. I don't have that much range, but up at my shoulder, I'm now like in mid B. Just think about things like that. All right, so now we're gonna move into some examples. So first with single sword, in terms of like baiting, right? Baiting is all this like really passive work. So something that I've started to work with a lot is, am I boring you? Come this way a little bit. Something that I'm working with a lot is this like my offhand shoulder is really far forward, right? So all I have to do is if Sean throws, and I can come over. I can come on the inside lane. Depending if Sean doesn't take it, if you throw on the other side, I can still get on the inside. Right, then cross. Right, with fakes, you can do, like I was talking about, this is probably my favorite combination in single sword, is you pump, throw, across. This is just a good reason to hit you at this point. Doing jukes, right? So doing these steps out, doing one of a really fun one that I like is like doing these fade out shots, because when people begin to move out, you think, oh, they're disengaging. Why would you throw a shot? So people will like begin to open their guard up or relax a little bit, but you're still throwing something threatening. Doing level changes where I kind of already talked about this, where I juke low and then I throw high. And you can also do that if you level change down and then throwing low, right, as you come up. You can also play with it where it's like, where am I going to go? Realize if you do it too much, like if you just smash the B button, people are just going to like hit you midway through. Single sword, really quick, is feints, fakes, and baits become the most influential, right? Because whoever opens themselves up in a bad way typically wins like 95% of the time. So if you can get your opponent to bite on a fake, on a feint, or on a bait, and you can capitalize on it correctly, you'll probably win. Florentine. I'll say really quick, Florentine is probably the hardest to throw these fakes and feints, and the reason why is there's symmetry here, right? Everything that I do is pretty much matched, but what I see, some things that I like to do with Florentine is the stabs. I've already talked about like the single sword stab this way, where I can throw across and stab in. I'll do the same thing with Florentine, but now I have something to block with. Additionally, you can do it now in different directions. I can stab like this, right? I'm juking down, and I can use this sword to sell it that I'm gonna go for this attack. Throw, right? You can even do it that way, right? Where now this sword is trying to like block off my opponent's guard. I can go across, or if you try to attack me with a sword, your guard would be higher. Right? I'm still coming across. I'm blocking, or I'm stabbing in. You can still do the same thing where it's like stab or throwing. You're supposed to be responding to me better. Okay. Right. Where I guess the point is that you throw one sword to instigate, and then you have the other sword to follow up. As I've talked about with Florentine, work in your X pattern or work in parallel lines across. Right? Don't never throw a fake in Florentine of like, I'm going to fake here and then I'm actually going to throw. That's probably not going to work. It's not really a fake then. Let's see. Yeah, just doing like the simple pumps as well, or the redirections of like throwing and stuff like that. The redirections, I think, are really, really powerful if you can use them well, but you have to be able to have the speed and the power to like follow up and make it really useful. If your redirection is like that, there's a bunch of time for your opponent to get you because you're open. Throw, right? You're supposed to hit me. I got hit. Sean's a bad assistant. All right. And then lastly, talking about fakes, feints, and baits with sword and board. As I mentioned before, you can bait the shoulder. Additionally, you can bait your hip. So this is typically a standard guard. But if you lean a little bit more, right, my hip is more exposed. So you could think somebody's going to try to throw that money, like block out, step in. I could just block down. Typically, you aren't going to want to block with the sword because the point of the bait is so you can hit them, right? And since you have a board, you can move the board or like slightly tilt in to actually block the shot. The same thing with the shoulder slot. If I have it down, right, throw it. I don't want to block like this. I can move the board and chop. What else? One thing that I like to do, this kind of works pretty much only on like mid-tier fighters and lower-tier fighters. More experienced fighters, this has a very low success rate. As I come this way a little bit, Sean, is you take a deep step here, and typically your opponent's going to move their guard, and you throw in that slot between. That works. You're going to have to move, and you're going to have to sell it real hard. But one of the nice things about this is open your guard a little bit, right? If I'm able to get it, I'm in a pretty good defensive stance, right? Sean doesn't have a lot. Sean can maybe wrap high, but now I can move, and if I miss, chop or go back up, flick up. One of my favorites, now that I think about it, is faking the cross into a dark side. If you know somebody loves to high cross, which a lot of Amtgarders do, yes, high. If you can get them to fake into a high cross, right, you pump, because a lot of that's all it takes is a pump or, actually throwing it, and you get them to go into a high cross, you follow up with the dark side, right? So it's just boom. And now they're armed, so you can throw the dark side twice or, hit a leg, finish it up that way. Doing a backstep, like fading chop on the shoulder side, switch me sides. Now this is going to be really hard for me to get because Sean has a dome. But, all right, you're in this big engagement, and then you step out and throw, right? And so, again, as you step out this way, you're trying to get them to move their guard down, and I'm throwing this shoulder chop, right? So here we are. and throw. If Sean did it on me, it would probably have a higher success rate because I have, one, a punch shield, and two, it's just like a flat foam. Since Sean has a dome, it hooks on his shoulder, so it's a harder shot to get. Additionally, there's this combo that I've talked about, which is a combo that I learned from Nip, Warlord Nip in CG, where you start off throwing a hip shot, and then you come up and you get the shoulder. Once you get your opponent adjusted to that, you go throw. So if you switch, right? What I'm really trying to get them to do is open up and get that money, right? So I throw, up, throw. Once they get used to that, you can up, right? And then once they get used to that, you juke your body, or you don't even have to juke your body all the time. You can throw the sword depending on what they respond to. That's a fun one, often kind of hard to do. In A range, as I've talked about already, is you are tweaking, like shifting your shoulders. You can tweak your arm with it, stepping over. Also, when you're fighting in A range, throwing high and then low. So you're like gonna throw this sky hook, and then you come back down, switch sides. Right, I throw this high and then low. These things you're just gonna have to like figure out, and it's gonna have to be comfortable to you at the end of the day. Lastly, like all of these things, I want people to realize, that's pretty much it. Is that any of the basic shots that I talk about in my Data 1 video, or Day 1 fundamentals, single swords, Florentine basics, sword and board basics, all of those basics, shots, and combinations, you can throw fakes with, you can throw feints with, you can mix and match things. It's not a rigid formula. And so begin to adapt it to your style, and sell it the way that seems like organic to you. Lastly, to counter people, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. Just some like tips that I have in my time of fighting is, well, first you have to recognize that you're being killed by these fakes, feints, and baits. If you don't know what's happening, then you're gonna have to figure it out. Be more conscientious of what's happening, be more in the moment. But once you realize that, a couple of things that you can do is if people are beginning to throw, often these fakes, feints, and baits, especially with the fakes and the feints, they become almost algorithmic for people. So you notice they're gonna do this pump, or they start to do that pump, step out. You're in a bad space. Don't put yourself in that bad space. Secondly, time them, right? So if somebody throws high, does the fake high, then money shot. When they come high and then they go low and then they're going to go high, there's this moment that their arm's exposed, right? So try to time that out. Or when they're going down, their arm is exposed. Try to time that out. If you have the speed to do it. And then lastly, I would say just try to interrupt them. A lot of these people, again, very algorithmic. If you interject or interrupt their algorithm, a lot of people are like, oh crap, I gotta reset. I can't throw that combo anymore. Or I can't throw it interrupted, so I have to reset it. So, Sean, come back really fast, I'm sorry. So, hurry up, double time, come on. Right, so throw at somebody's hand, do the do the high money one, the nip combo. You don't know it. Okay, so you throw high and then you throw low, right? So as like Sean throws high, I'm gonna hit his hand because now it like jams up in their head. Or, cut the lane entirely where, I know the shot's gonna come for like here, step in, and now it's jammed. Sean doesn't have a lot of movement. If he wants to do anything, he has to go real deep underneath my sword, which this is a really easy block to follow up on, or he has to trace over my sword, right? And if he traces over it, I can chop down, or I can block out, something like that. Or one of my favorites, leg them, because now they're processing this combo, and then like, yeah, I don't want to deal with this. And a lot of people aren't going to be able to throw that many fakes or feints from the leg position, but be very conscientious about the baits, because now this is like a really good place to bait your opponent into coming in and trying to get an easy kill, like with their legs. So just something to think about. I'm going to have a whole video on legs, fighting legged opponents and fighting legged, so just keep an eye out for that. But that's all I have prepared for today, so I appreciate everybody's time and attention, and thanks for watching this video, and thanks, Sean, for being bad. Great man-at-arms. And yeah, I'll see you next time on my Newb to Warlord series. Thanks, guys.